All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming back for day 2. Really appreciate that. I hope y'all had a great day yesterday. And I'm just going to go through some quick slides, especially to welcome folks that have joined us online, since they may not have joined us yesterday. So you're here for 40 years of foresight. We think that this is the future of B2B marketing. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And yesterday we spent some time trying to think about how the future would look. Today, we're going to give you some practical ways to get there. So I hope you'll enjoy the 4 presentations that we have for you today. You're visiting with us at Penn State. So we've come back to Penn State where we were founded. It's been beautiful here, even though we had to water the grass this morning, so that's okay. We are the only organization that's devoted to B2B, and we disseminate the research that we support and fund to our membership. We have a bunch of fellows, some of which have joined us. I think, okay, so 31, 32, I'm in the rounding kind of thing. So 40, 41 years, 30, 31, 32. We have a lot of fellows, and we have partner firms and our practice fellows also that support our membership. You would have seen Rand and I running around here, as well as Stefan and Andrew, who's here. But the person who does all the work is Lori, who's not in this room, but you know that she's got everything, and if you need anything, that's where to go. Our membership is here, and in particular, I want to just welcome our 3 new members to ISBM: Sensient, Godfrey, and Swagelok. And remind you, although I have seen many of you participating in this, getting your 3 friends. So we are not just a 2-drink minimum people, we're a 3-friend minimum. So do spend the time networking, meeting with friends, and finding new colleagues that can help you. Day 1, I'm just going to remind you that we had some great presentations in day 1, and all of those are going to be available because they were all recorded. In a few days, you'll get a link to that. If you don't, contact Lori or I. Today, we're going to start off with JT Mudge, Seeing Beyond the Horizon. And then on the track that is the membership track, we'll have these presentations as well. So all of those will be more about tactically executing these things that we've been talking about. At the end of today, we're going to have our Marketing Excellence Roundtable. If you haven't told us already that you're staying for that, I wish you'd let us know and that you should join us. We'll be talking about AI readiness in our curriculum, about some pilots that we've had with Propolis, and other things that we want to get your input on as we go forward. Give us some advice. So logistics, like before, if there's is an alarm or we need to evacuate, please go out through the exits. Our lunch today will be in the same place it was before, in the atrium, right where we walked in. Snacks are always where you registered. Feel free to help yourself there. There are still books in that library, so feel free to go and shop our library. It's free, and take anything that you'd like. We also have those bags and water bottles and pens and such, and so feel free to grab one of those. We will have breaks as we had before, so feel free to make friends while you're on break. We'll let you know about questions, but I think that worked yesterday because we did them one by one. On Zoom, so if you're joining us on Zoom, we would appreciate if you stay muted and don't worry about using your video. We can't see you, but please type your questions as you think of them into the chat window. I'll be watching the chat window all during the presentation, and I will offer the questions up to the speaker as appropriate. So feel free to just type a question as you think of it. As I mentioned, you'll be able to get these later. And if you want to take a screenshot, if you're at home, there's your phone number in case there's a problem. Just text us or email or call Lori. Okay, that's that. We can change over to the other deck. And while you do that, I will introduce JT. So I'm super excited for having JT here. So we've talked a little bit about a bunch of things, and he's just a wealth of fun stuff that he knows. So he is officially an award-winning futurist and a strategist with 25 years of consulting experience. He's worked with numerous NGOs and corporations, including the CDC, the Nature Conservancy, Pew, Apple, and Samsung. And I think that really informs a lot of the things that he thinks about. He's a speaker and advises organizations on strategy and foresight, and he teaches foresight and change theory at the University of Houston. So, JT?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to thank Lynn and Rand and the rest of the ISBM team and all of you in the ISBM family. It's just been fantastic being here with you and welcoming so much into your community. And one of the things that we talked about on Tuesday evening, which I thought was really interesting when we were discussing the history of the ISBM, one of the things that stuck out to me was the comments how in the B2B world, in the marketing world, you're kind of a niche, right? And what does that feel like to be the people that are passionate about your work, but you're not often seen in the field, in the larger field. And actually, I was like, wow, these are kind of my people, because that's exactly what strategic foresight is in the strategy world, right? And so how I see you interacting and the camaraderie and the friendship is all like our gathering. So I feel like I found a second home. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. Like Lynn said, I am a futurist and a strategist. So being a futurist is an actual job. It's an actual thing, a profession, and it's pretty much as cool as it sounds. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do this work. I do teach at the University of Houston, where I teach in the master's program, the Masters of Foresight. We also do certificate training and things like that. But to give you a little bit of a flavor about what is it? What's the mindset of a futurist? How to just start with a little story. And last fall, in October, my eldest daughter, she's 26, and she's also a futurist, which is really proud dad moment, right? We were on our way to the World Future Studies Federation Conference in Paris, where we were both presenting on different topics. And I said, well, this will be fun. Let's spend a couple days in London first, because we've never done that before. So I said, here's the deal. I don't want to plan any of that. So you plan it, I'll give you a budget, and then we'll do a couple days in London. So we get to Heathrow, we get the cab to the Airbnb. Walk in, and the thing is pink as pink can be. The carpet, the drapes, the pillowcases, the comforter, the towels, the shower, the plates, the mugs, the toaster. You can get these matching pink toasters, right? I wasn't sure if the toast itself was pink, but outside of the pinkness of the, that's cool. I love it, eclectic kind of stuff. Besides that, we were also located 1 block away from Baker Street. Specifically, we look out our window, see the top of 221B Baker Street. And for those of you who don't know, that is the famous home of the fictional Sherlock Holmes. So of course, early the next day, we head up, first in line, not necessarily a huge Sherlock, or wasn't then, huge Sherlock Holmes fan, but I appreciated the work. But when you go into this museum, and there's all these artifacts of these cases, as if they were real. And you have things like the Red-Headed Lead, Hound of the Baskervilles, all these famous Sherlock Holmes stories. And what you see is there's all these clues that he's collected. And he collects these clues and his powers of observation in order to tell a story about a crime that has happened or something that has gone on. And he does it for a crime case, right? But he also does it just when he's in, for those who are familiar with Holmes, when he's in normal interactions, he just sees things, perception, he connects dots, right? And as we were walking around the park afterwards, I was thinking, when my daughter and I were talking, you know, being a futurist is like being a detective. This is very similar. What we do is we collect information, right? We don't call them clues, we call them signals. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we do that in order to tell better stories about possible futures. So while Holmes is telling stories about the past with these clues, we are telling stories about possible futures with these signals. And then how are we prepared for these possible stories as they might unfold. So I get to be a detective and a futurist, which is really awesome. We're going to have pretty much a whirlwind of information I'm going to give you, and it'll get you nice and charged for the rest of the day. We're going to do these 6 topics. The first half is going to be topics 1 through 4, give you a real quick primer on futures and foresight. Then we're going to go to the topic that's near and dear to my heart, elements of change, and how change happens. That's the class that I teach. And then we're going to go over 2 methodologies and 2 ways of looking at different types of signals of the future that helps us classify and organize that information. That's the futures triangle and 3 horizons. Then we're going to actually talk about the practice of scanning and then how you might be able to apply that. So this is kind of a little bit of a how-to today, and we're not going to be talking about specific possible futures. All right. So what is a futurist? A futurist is somebody basically who studies change and helps create agency. That's what we do. Quite simple. Strategic foresight, which is a discipline inside of future studies, is applying a method and a discipline, applying that rigor, right, the evidence to future studies, to strategy and decision making. The whole goal of strategic foresight is to make better decisions. All right. Futures and foresights. What is futures? Well, like I said, it's a study of change, how to have agency. We don't predict. You might have heard this yesterday. We do not predict. If you hear someone saying, I predict, they're probably not professional futurists maybe, but they might be futures interested, but it doesn't really help us because we're not trying to evaluate possibilities. So we don't predict. What we do, the word we use is anticipate. We help people anticipate. Futures is plural. It's not the future, it's a future or the futures. There's multiple possibilities, right? It's not about technology. You see a lot of futurists or people that talk about the future and it's tech innovation, right? That's just one aspect, but it's not just about technology. R and Y, a conception people have about futures is you're looking really far into the future. But as you might imagine, if you're doing a 1-year plan, right? If you're doing a 1-year plan and you're looking in your organization, you're gonna look at things that immediately affect you. You're not gonna look at things that are kind of on the fringe, on the side. The farther you look out, those things on the fringe start to have an impact on your trajectory as a business or an organization. So futurists, as far out as we look, we also have to look as far wide. So a lot of futurists are polymaths. We have to be able to be well disciplined in many different industries. And last, similar to that, it's complex systems. If anybody of you here studies systems, it's crucial to our work. Everything's connected, right? It's one way or another. So works like Denali Meadows and others, it's really important to understand how systems work, to understand how change works in those systems. All right. So like I said, we have a methodology. This is approved by the Association of Professional Futurists. A lot of futures consultancies will use something very, very similar because it's pretty tried and true, similar to other strategic methodologies. Our first half is that sort of researching and thinking. The second half is applying. So the first thing we do is we understand what we're trying to accomplish, our scope, current state. And we'll work on what we're going to talk about today, scanning, finding those clues. Then we come into what we usually think of images of the future. You might be familiar with scenarios, vignettes, that sort of thing. And then we don't leave it there. That's only halfway. We have to continue and see how you're going to apply that to your organization. So we go into visioning. How does this match your company's goals? What your company is trying to do? Designing. How do we put that into your annual plans, into your strategic plans, into your daily workflows? And last, how do you change as an organization so you're more future thinking and ready to anticipate possible changes? All right, that's one. Now we're on 2. Elements of change. Change has many characteristics, many ways of looking at it, right? So we have some ways that we can kind of use as tools to help us think about it. In the 16-week class that I teach as part of the master's program, we go into this really, really deep, and we talk about philosophy, sociology, macro history, you name it. But we have some simple tools as well. Since we don't have 16 weeks, I don't think I could say, but first one we look at is the source of change. There's differentiations in where the signals are coming from, right? First and foremost, is it internal or external? We talked yesterday, Patrick had some really good examples about how change external, right? But we also have change internal as well. And I mean that to your industry or to your organization. And then we classify it in different ways as well, because it's social, so political. Rates of change is really interesting because a lot of times we think about change as being, well, I didn't see that coming, as being instantaneous, really quick, rapid change. And that can happen. That's what we call it, transformational. But most of the time it's incremental. Even when we think it's transformational, it's actually incremental. There's a long tail that has been happening before we start to see this change, generally as a public. We'll talk a little about that when we talk about emergence. Levels of change, how extensive is the change? And last, where is that change happening on a time horizon? How long is it going to take for that change to come through?
JT, question, okay?
Yeah.
In terms of rate of change, there's something I've been fascinated by, harmonic change. Something that's happening through the period you really.
Great question, yes. So in the class, we go into that quite a bit, and usually the students write papers on what they consider the shape of change, and that's part of it, the cycles of change. Depending on how what zoomed in you are, it's gonna look different, right? If you look at a circle close enough, it looks like a line, right? So it's really giving you that perspective, and we have to look at it at both perspectives. So there is a pendulum, there's a cycle to a lot of change, that's a lot of theories. Western theory, traditionally, or Western practice tends to be a lot more linear, right? Our thinking is much more linear. Eastern practices are much more, those that work with futurists like from China or whatever, they have a tendency to understand cycles a little bit better, working into their business world. Where in the West, we're like, no, this way, look at our trajectory. Like, you look at a commercial for, some marketing room, right? It's a commercial and then they're doing some ad or something. And those charts are always like, very, very fine and drawn. That's one way of looking at change, but that's not necessarily the whole picture. So absolutely cycles, pendulums back and forth, can have that effect. And it's actually quite a big topic. So we can chat more about it.
I'd love to.
I would love to too. All right, so real quick, we talked about the categories of change. We use STEEP. I know that other people use PESTLE or other types of acronyms. Futurists love acronyms, and different strategists will come up with their own and what have you. I come up with several too, it's kind of fun. But essentially, you're breaking down different categories because change happens differently. Different characteristics about change, different archetypes of change happen depending upon your category. So we try to think of these, and the one thing I'll mention about environmental is it's not just climate. Just space is our environment. There's noise, there's sound, there's light, there's all these types of things that happen. So that types of change can be environmental inside of there as well. Pretty straightforward. It's how we classify. All right. Okay, quick sip of water and check my time. Okay. So we're going to talk about two ways of sort of classifying and thinking about change. And the first one, probably my favorite, although I keep saying about all of them, is the future triangle. So the future triangle has 3 points. We have the past, present, future. There you go, future triangle. It's really important because it helps us understand the different driving forces that are a natural part of our reality. Okay, there's a past, present, and future. And we live in all of those worlds all the time. There's influences of all those around us. What the futures triangle does is it breaks it up into 3 categories. What we call the weight of the past. These are things that are traditions, values, things the way they've always been done, things we've seen as success, things we've seen as failures. These are things that inform us. And weight isn't always the best term to use because it can be kind of negative, right? You think like, oh, it's weighing me down. But weight can also be a stabilizing factor. I was talking Joel last night, and I was thinking like I had an empty can in front of me, like this can has no weight in it, and it just tips over, right? There's some liquid in it, some volume, some weight, it doesn't tip as easy. So weight can be a positive thing. We don't do it subjectively, we just say there is a weight of the past, things that hold us back from making changes, right? Things that give us notions of how we don't want to go places or do want to go places. The push of the present, this is an interesting one. It's the world we're in right now. We're currently doing things. I'm here with you. We're at this conference. Likely people aren't just going to pick up on a whim and go do something else right in the middle of this talk. Hopefully, I'm engaging enough for that. But so there's a, I'm in the middle of something, right? Someone's coming in the room, like, I'll be with you in a minute. I'm in the middle of something, right? That's what this is, the push of the present. It's momentum in your current activities. That is a driving force of change. Pull the futures. This is a lot of times the most aspirational one, the most positive one we think of, right? These are our visions, like this is where I want to go. This is who I want to be. This is what we want to avoid. These visions, some of the visions aren't good. That's the pull of the future. And all 3 of these are happening at once, right? And we were trying to understand change. And we think about those steep categories, they're happening differently in each one of us. So you're sometimes like, why can't we just get this done? Well, there's a reason for it. And we, as futurists, try to understand that reason. So this is really important. We'll come to in a minute when we talk about signals of change. We have to understand where those signals fit. Because what we do with signals is we create drivers. And when we have drivers, we map them onto the futures triangle and say, this is where things are happening. And then we have an idea of the shape of change that we're trying to look at and try to have agency over. Next is a similar one, 3 horizons. Now, this is not like Mackenzie's 3 horizons. This is a very specific tool that we use in strategic foresight. And it helps us map out how far out change is happening. And many of you in marketing would probably recognize a lot of these concepts. There's a lot of synergy here. You might recognize some of these shapes. If those of you that study an MBA and stuff like that. First horizon, that's what's happening in the near time, right? That's where we are today. It starts off straight, very straight, and then it drops off. We call that a baseline. almost guaranteed, not that I would ever place bets, I don't predict. It's almost guaranteed that over time, a baseline will not happen continually on a straight line. It's just pretty much guaranteed. It just doesn't. It's natural entropy, right? Things change. Businesses, however, will say, it's been working for us for 20 years, it's working for us now, we're just gonna keep doing it. And they do that, and then you'll notice what happens to the first horizon, it drops off, right? The strategic fit of the way they've been doing business goes way down. That is closely associated with the push of the present. The third horizon, this is the magic space. They're harder to find, they're signals, we don't really know what to do with them because they don't have an emergence yet, but we do find signs of them. When we say something comes out of the blue, it's because we notice it not until we get right up here, right? But actually, it's had 20 years to be being worked on, right? So we as futurists, and you are all futurists, by the way, we're all great at being futurists, that's what the humans do. We're just not great at being disciplined and rigorous futurists, recording it and analyzing it in that way. If you look at this third horizon, we call those weak signals, okay? There's gonna be a lot of them. We're gonna be not find quantity-wise a lot of them, but there's gonna be a lot of variation there, and any one of these things could possibly happen. But generally one or two or a few are gonna have a significant impact as the futures unfold, right? We call that third horizon, and that's related closely to the pull of the future. Then we have this interesting space in the middle, right? And this is the second horizon. This is really a mashup between the two. This is maybe generally 5 to 10 years out. And the pull of the future and the push of the present are kind of happening at once. You'll have a company that says, hey, I want to be an upstart and take over the market share of a company that's doing great in the first horizon. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, we're just going to improve it, right? Incremental change, that's second horizon. But because they haven't reinvented the wheel, they're going to suffer a lot of the same market conditions, a lot of the same problems that those companies in the first horizon are going to have, and they would potentially have a fall off as well, possibly become replaced and irrelevant due to things on the third horizon, right? VHS tapes, great example, right? The DVD was a second horizon event. It was a bridge. It was a different medium. Instead of tape, it was optics, right? Machines look the same, the buttons look the same, you still couldn't program the stupid thing. But then we have streaming, totally different paradigm. And obviously, I still have a VHS player, believe it or not, for old tapes. But it's collecting dust. So that's what happens. It's no longer a strategic fit for my use as a consumer, right? All right. Timeline, how it fits in. Think about this as baseline, first horizon, alternatives, this is that transitory, and then weak signals. So let's jump into that. Okay, weak signals, what I said, horizon 3. How do you know you have a good weak signal, right? Because they're kind of weird, and you don't know if it's relevant or not. So I found this from Elena, I'm not gonna say her name right, Hiltunen. She has a paper on weak signals and organizational futures learning. Fantastic paper. Yeah, it's just really a great read. Well, for someone like me, who's a nerd in futures, but it could be for you too. If it makes your colleagues laugh, if you say something like, yeah, or whatever, crazy futurist, that is a big good sign. Aha, I made you laugh, right? No way, it'll never happen. If a client says this or someone says this, you're probably onto something. And you can probably sneak a few of those in there before you think you're just out of your mind. It makes people wonder, like, or we've never heard about it. Right? Really good. The last one's really important. If you're in an organization or in a group and they're like, we're not going to talk about that. It's too politically charged, it's too this, it's too that, we can't bring it up. We did a project for a public library where there were things that if we put it in the papers, it was public. It was part of the public, you could read it. And you're like, we cannot put that out there, right? There's sensitivities there that would drive the public mad and we could potentially lose our funding. Is it a real possibility of a weak signal we're finding? Yeah, of course. Are they banning books in different parts of the country? Are they putting books like Everybody Poops in the adult section? Yes, these are petitions that are happening. Is that going to make them feel good about it? No, just going to give their constituents some ideas. So they don't want to put it in there. And those are the ones we know that have a lot of traction because they're very sensitive to their world. The weak signals, things that are still too incomplete to really understand their impact, but we record them. And wild cards, a little bit different. Wild cards are very, very interesting because they can be completely disruptive, literally out of nowhere, like an asteroid hitting the Earth, right? These things are almost impossible to find signals for, but we can imagine them, right? Science fiction authors do a fantastic job. It's not, science fiction is not just for entertainment a lot of times. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Neil Stevenson, if for those of you who might be familiar with him, he puts stuff in his fiction that comes true more or less, right? It gives us really interesting windows, the whole metaverse, right, idea stuff. In the 80s, he was writing about this, right? Really interesting stuff. So we have to be looking for these wild cards that we can have visions of, but we're not always going to find signals. If we find a signal of a wild card, that's great, because the whole idea is to remove surprise about possible futures we anticipate. All right, so how does the emergence, right? Something on horizon 3, how does it become wild 1? This is going to seem very familiar to probably product marketers. It's in the Wild West, it's fringe, it's abnormal, it's mad laboratory, it's science fiction, it's 1 or 2 people working on it. Not really well known. Maybe not peer reviewed papers on it. Yeah, it's really in the distance, but there's something out there about it. Someone said something about it. Now it starts to people start to put some brain power, probably some resources into it to try to figure out what this thing is. Does it have a real impact on markets? And then it becomes mainstream. We're all using it, right? Or a large portion of us have it available to use. And businesses start to build their businesses on top of it, right? They start to use it in their business as a distinguisher. They're not manufacturing it, they're not doing it, but they are adopting it. Becomes legislated, and then you know you're at Horizon 1 when it becomes litigated, right? It's like, it's official. If lawyers are making money off of it, it's official. And where do we see generative AI? Is probably right about here right now, right? It's actually been going on for a long time, and I used to work a lot in B2B marketing and doing personalization and things like that, and we've had elements of this happening for 10 to 15 years, right? It's been clunky, it's been all these other things, and now it's actually went through some consolidation, they improved it, right? And then all of a sudden, for a lot of people, it's coming up, especially people that aren't in the world of using it. Marketers, I think, are really great at adopting it, specifically B2C marketers are great at adopting all these new technologies, so some of them have early previews into this. All right, so what is scanning? The detective work, right? And all of these images, by the way, were generated with Microsoft Copilot, because I thought that'd be kind of fun. I thought that was kind of neat. Scanning is the searching for signals of futures. It's a foundational practice for strategic foresight that feeds the research and insights into what we're trying to do for better decision making, right? I worked until just recently in big data, right? We did data-driven decision making. This is really like signals-driven decision-making or foresight-driven decision. And I love this quote by Jim Gator. He's a famous futurist out of the University of Hawaii. He's been around the field for quite some time, one of the fathers of modern strategic foresight. He has this comment: any useful idea about the future should at first appear ridiculous. I love that. Oh, I love it. I include it in almost every presentation. And it makes sense, because if it doesn't appear ridiculous, then you probably already know about it, right? It can be weird, but if it's already on your horizon, then you already probably have thought about it and anticipated it. So it's maybe not as useful. So we look for signals, we find stuff like this, it's cool. All right. Signals versus tips. There's a little bit of a difference. Signals are things, they're blips. They're small, they're almost inconsequential in and of themselves, but in the aggregate, they provide a lot of value, right? In the aggregate, you put them together, you start to find pictures and drivers of the future. Similarly, and when you are scanning, horizon scanning, you will also come across what we call tips, but they're different. We categorize them slightly differently. Tips are more fleshed out, right? They're things that we look at that have some more meat on the bone to them, as opposed to just a blip. So trends, that makes sense. It's something going up, down, it's something over time, right? Or maybe it's staying the same. Issues, these are things that should I or shouldn't I, should we or shouldn't we? What are the issues that are happening around the world, around your community, around your organization, around your domain? Plans, formal announcements. A lot of times, especially for big projects, somebody plans to do X. Elon Musk plans to do many crazy things. These are his plans. They haven't come to fruition yet in many cases, right? And projections. Makes sense. A lot of these come from big organizations, from research groups. Like I get a lot of my projections in social work from the United Nations. The United Nations projects that in 2100 the world population will cap at 11 point whatever billion. So these are important things for futurists to know, but they're not signals. They're a little bit different. All right. The process is actually extraordinarily simple. This is why I wanted to show you today, because this is something I hope you can actually take back and practice. And it just makes sense, but you have to include it as part of our methodology, so. You find it, you have to go out and search for this stuff, right? That makes sense. You have to collect it, you put it somewhere organized, you put some methodology around your storage of those things. And then we analyze it. Once we have enough, we start to look at them like, what does this all mean when we put it all out, right? So the process in which we do these may be very specific, but the overall process should make sense to everybody. All right, what is it when we capture a signal? What are we trying to capture? We don't always capture all of this. For our futures of project, with the futures of B2B marketing in 2030 in North America, right? We might capture 400 to 500 of signals, right? We're not generally going to be as rigorous and capture all of these, but there's things that we always capture. Obviously things like title and date. We pick a horizon, and we're pretty specific on pick one. Futurists generally don't pick one of anything. That's kind of what we are notoriously famous for not doing, but we do have a little discipline, and we will say pick a horizon as you defined it in your project scope. Steep categories, we pick one or more, so here you can have a little flexibility. But try to pick the really dominant things we talk about. Is it social? Is it technological? Is it political? And if you're doing a specific project on your domain that you're trying to study, like B2B marketing in North America, there are some probably specific categories that apply to your domain, right? Put those in there as well. A description, some keywords, right? We all understand hashtags, hopefully in this day and age. And then like implications. Like, why did you record that hit? This is really important if you're working on a longer project, because you may come back to it 3 months and like, why did I do that? It's also really good because a lot of the projects we work on, if we're doing 500 signals, we work as a team, right? Futures is a participatory sport. So we want to be able to include some information there. Then we might try to do some, try to turn it into some sort of quantitative metrics, depending upon how in-depth or how big the project is. Dreams, this is one I came up with. I'm like, that'd be kind of fun. How do I know it's a good one? Is the signal different? Obviously, that ridiculous idea in some way. Is it recurring? In other words, you find more than one when we're analyzing it. That's probably interesting. Is it engaging? Does it really make you think? Is it amazing? If you were to tell someone, they're gonna go, wow, what? Amazing is always great. And then is it meaningful? What's the impact on you? Because you can have something that's fantastic about the newest kitty litter that cleans itself. But if you're in developing a rocket for NASA, it could be really interesting, but is it meaningful? Unless you're bringing cats to space, probably not. Although if you are bringing cats to space, it would probably be really meaningful. And that might be kind of scary. All right, so examples, right? Let's do a quick time check here. All right, we're doing good. You guys doing good? Getting fast? But it's good.
Well, JT, I've made it for a question then.
Yes.
Gathering these
Signals?
signals, can you give us some indication of who's the best kind of, what talent do you need to really be a good signal gatherer?
You're all signal gatherers. We're all perceptive. It's just fine tuning it a little bit. So I would say we're all good at it. I think some people are naturally more inquisitive and perceptive and want to learn stuff. They're probably maybe have a little more tendency. And if you're someone who tends to just dive into if you get sidetracked and you're going off in some rabbit hole, you're probably the type of person that might be more inclined to be doing it naturally in your day-to-day life. And we're going to talk about 3 ways in which we do that in just a moment. But that's a really good question. Yes.
So as you're thinking about recording signals or looking at signals, I think it's fair to say, we all know there's a lot of misinformation out there. This is kind of a wild era for misinformation being generated from a lot of different places.
Good.
Is it better to kind of take everything in aggregate and just pull everything together without worrying about the validation step first, or to sift through and validate from the beginning?
Yeah, so that's a really, really great question. When we're talking about signals versus tips, that's different. Okay, so for signals, yes, grab it. If you can smell the BS, then don't grab it, but don't spend too much time on that, right? That's not the time to do it, because that's what we do in the analyzation part of the signals. If we look at something and it's the one really weird thing and it actually disagrees with everything else, it could still be a really good signal, or it could be not, right? So we have to look at it. And that's one reason we also cite the sources in that anatomy of a signal, right? Because we want to know where does that come from? And fringe isn't bad. You want some fringe in there for sure. You could have conspiracy theory stuff in here because that is telling us something about the state of what we're in. It's telling us about where we're anxious about, what we're worried about, how many people are following that, right? That tells you a lot of information, so it's kind of meta information about a city, right? So it's good to grab it if you find it interesting enough to grab. It's kind of subjective at that point. Here's an example of one that I came across a couple weeks ago. I love this. I'm gonna do a poll here. Dutch coffee brand recruits children to its board of directors. So how many of you here, raise your hands, if you work on a board, an over board that isn't currently has children, you may be ages 8 to 13 on their board. Right? What? Okay. How about 16 to 18? Anyone? No? If you have a couple hands want to go up, I might have said maybe it's Horizon 2, right? Probably Horizon 3. And this is real. This is totally real. And it actually has a real purpose. It actually has a real purpose, and it's one that's so near and dear to my heart, which is about how we include stakeholders in our futures and our visions. That's a topic I teach. It's a class I came up with at the University of Houston, Futures and Ethics, and it's about generational and ancestral thinking, right? So this article really spoke to me personally, and so I categorize this. It's social, it's environmental, because it's about sustainability, biodegradable coffee. Put some hashtags in there. There's some governance. There's some stakeholder capitalism, one of my favorite ideas. Sustainability. And it's including youth to decolonize futures, right? This is written for me, not a client. I know what I'm talking about here. It's written for my team. And so I can use words that are sort of internal and not have to explain what decolonizing futures means, but I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that at length, any point in time. Another one, this sound suppressing silk, which is a tongue twister in itself, sound suppressing silk, can create quiet spaces. All right, that's pretty cool. All right, we've heard about things like this before, but you know, this is something kind of new. And there's a couple key things here. Let's see if I can get the point of the word. No, all right. The word can. That's a tip off for us, right? A lot of times headlines, you gotta go past the headline because headlines meant like clickbait to get you into there, right? But if the article is talking about possibilities not actually happening, no one's using this yet, or at least not in a regular setting, maybe it's used at a very highly industrial level. That's interesting. That tells us kind of what horizon it might be, right? So it's technological, it's environmental. I hashtag just really quickly spaces, materials, and noise. I'm really big into sound science and noise science. And custom sound spaces. And it's an increasive awareness of noise in spaces, become more attuned, conscious of noise around us once we start having these things in our world. And I put sound snobs. You can imagine a situation where some environments have this. You go into a coffee space and it's got these really nice sound silks, right, to protect you. And you walk into one and it's not, and people are like, oh, I can't drink here. There's no sound silk. The sound quality is subpar, you know. So you can imagine this whole rise of the sound snob. This is the weird things you got to think about, these implications, right? And I'm telling you, when you go into a coffee place and like, the sound here is awful, you're gonna think about that. Scanning sources. So that kind of makes sense where you're gonna find this stuff. Some might be a little bit different. Published books and articles. Believe it or not, books are still a good source, especially with they're published often enough. And when we're scanning, we're not looking for the day's headlines. Something I didn't mention. We generally want to look at things that aren't too old. Probably don't go back more than 5 years too much. Depends on the industry, right? If we're going to go back to something like fusion, maybe a little further back. But we're looking for some things that are emerging, right? So sometimes we'll go back far because those tails will be really long for signals 3, right? We want to look at that. And so books and articles that are published can be great. Scientific articles, patents, things like that. Fantastic sources, published information. Media, of course, this is where the fire hose is and the stuff you get to trust a little bit, maybe I'm not quite so sure. Podcasts, radio, news sites, news feeds, news feeds, fantastic. We'll talk about that in a minute. The web, just the web in general. You can go to user groups, Reddit, things like that. Again, you don't always trust it, but you can kind of see the pulse and what people are thinking about and possibly find some gems out of it. Newsletters, another fantastic website, especially industry-specific websites. You're gonna find some interesting things there. And last, social. Besides just social networks online, you have chat groups, right? Maybe you're part of the Slack groups or Discord groups. For those of you that are chatting in your different communities around industries. In real life networks, oh, this is so valuable, we kind of forget that we can actually talk and learn from each other person to person. And not in an academic setting. And one of the things I do when I travel is I often go down to the restaurant or the bar and, or on the plane sometimes even, and I just think, hey, what do you do? What's your industry? What do you do? And you ask them questions like, wow, that sounds really interesting. Like, what kind of challenges have you had in the last 10 years, right? You can get a lot of such great information on what are you working on? Like, what are you most excited about? And you just listen, right? Just listen. All right, some of my favorite scanning sources, this is just a few. You kind of get the bug and all of a sudden you just become this sort of scanning junkie. The New York Times has some interesting stuff, not just headlines, but they usually, their morning report, that newsletter I get, has usually a couple kind of, not quite fringy, but a little bit out there interest stories. NPR, not their top of the news hour stuff, usually they're sort of side stories. Sometimes they have an author on that has a topic that's really interesting. Patent drop, I highly recommend this one. What are people actually putting into patents? That's not gonna happen for quite some time. This can get a lot of great Horizon 3 stuff out there. And it's pretty scary stuff as well. I have a climate newsletter from Catherine Hayhoe, fantastic. She's the chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy, where I've consulted quite a bit. And she, what she does in her newsletter, she gives you like the good and the bad of what's happening in climate. She's very balanced, so she'll have like, what she calls it, she's like the good and then the not so good, right? And so it gives, she tries to balance out her news. It's not just completely agenda driven. I use Google Aggregator for my news, and I use it both in those of you familiar with like private mode or incognito mode, because then it doesn't remember all my preferences. And then I do one where it does remember my preferences. And that's so I get a little bit more of a balanced fare. And I'll get Fox and CNN right next to each other, right? And I'll get all these things. The curated one for me, where I log in, has that knows that I like fringe stuff, so it finds fringe stuff for me. It's great. It's so good. Like, oh, it's so crazy. But I thought this was interesting. And this is a side note. It says environment is the topic, which I study quite a bit. Then it has no, physics, excuse me, physics, which I also study. It has the Cubs and the Braves and the 2024 NCAA division. So you can't always trust that the systems know exactly what they're delivering to you, because obviously there's a problem there. Some other ones, Tomorrow City. This has some really great stuff happening in as our urban centers grow and what the futures of that might look like across the world, right? This is a really great global source. So there's a bunch of them here you can look at. How do we record these? So that was like step one, go out and search. Step two is our scanning tools. At the University of Houston, we use this one, we've been using for about a year now, called Raindrop. We used to use Digo quite a bit, and then you can also just use whatever you have, Google Sheets. The nice thing about these bookmarking tools like Raindrop is they're built in, you can build them into your browser and your phone. So you just click a button and it automatically grabs the title and the URL and the date and all that stuff for you. So it saves a lot of data entry. And then you can categorize it. I can put it into all these different categories if you're working on more than one project. And then you can share that with your colleagues, right? So it's a really good tool. I'd recommend checking it out. It's pretty easy once you start using it. And because what you'll find is you'll see, oh, I just found this signal. What do I do with it? I'll come back to it later, and you don't. So this just allows you to click a button and kind of forget about it. Quick couple of tips before we get into the last section. Don't limit your sources. Go beyond what you normally read. Look wide beyond your field. Don't be siloed. Be organized, be intentful with your collection. And the last, don't forget the dream. Do an analysis. This is a meaningful hit. All right. Last section, and do a quick last time check. Perfect. All right. So I kind of told you a little bit about how to do it, what you're looking for. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of purposes in which you use this in your organization, right? All right. There's three main types of scanning practices, right? The first one is a project scan, like we talked about. You're doing the futures of electric cars in Japan through the year 2035, right? Okay. When we do that, that's a very specific targeted type of scans. You're looking at things that really only apply to that. And you're going to generate a lot of them in a short period of time. Usually about 4 weeks. Like I said, we might generate about 400. So you're doing about 100 a week. That's a lot. And a lot of times we have a team when we do that, right? This is targeted and concentrated, and once it's done, it's done. But hopefully you're still adding on to it if it's a vital part of your organization. Second is scanning as a practice. Okay, This means that in your organization, you have recognized that foresight is important to you, strategic foresight is important. And you have allocated resources to the continual scanning of possible futures and signals, right? So this is, and it doesn't have to be a full-time job, but this is a regular practice inside your organization. It is somewhat targeted to your industry and domain, but maybe not to a specific project. And you still need to do some grooming, regular grooming, and hopefully you're probably gonna put out a report to show people that it's valuable, some implications behind it, maybe once a quarter, depending on your organization. We call it generally like a signals report, not a trends report. And that can be a good way of getting that information out to your organization. The last is once you start doing this, and you don't even have to do it for your company, maybe you're part of a community board or just something you're interested in, is the forever scan. This is just when you're reading stuff online, you're reading books, you're talking to people and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Because as we train our minds, we do this and we practice just like anything else. We start doing it all the time, so seeing it everywhere, right? It becomes just, it's almost like the Matrix, you can see the code and you just see the world around you. It becomes quite transformative to your own life because you become much more perceptive, right? Highly perceptive. So if that happens to you, they have the forever scan, and that's just every time you're seeing something that's interesting, you're just recording it, you're categorizing it, right? It becomes second nature. It becomes almost addicting. So if you're doing the first one, a project scan, we want to set that scope, right? This is a whole phase in and of itself, so we're not going to go over this too much, but just know that we're setting a scope and what we call the domain, the area in which you're going to study. Then we look at like what categories go around that domain and what subcategories. And then we always include those speed categories, right? Those general categories. So you've defined the area of study, so you know what you're searching for. And we, what kind of, is this a project I'm just doing once, or is this going to be, we're going to continue to do this, right? This is going to be something so important to us. What is your key question you're answering? Like what is going to be our response to generative AI in marketing, right? That could be your question. Geography, a lot of times we want to limit it by geography. If we think the whole world, there's a lot that goes into that creates variance, right? Culture, economics, you name it. So we try to limit it to where you're specifically trying to have an effect, your agency. And last, the time horizon. How far are you really talking about? Push it. As futurists, we look at a minimum nearly 5 years out. Anything less than that is current plan that you're already doing. So we look at 5 years or more, but kind of define it. It really depends on your domain. If you're doing, interstellar travel, you're probably looking pretty far out in your time horizon. And if you're looking at using generative AI in your business as a distinguisher, that's probably a very close time horizon. Right? Scanning as a practice, right? The second column, still have a focus. You need to make it a habit, dedicate resources to it, right? Have some legitimacy behind it. You got to make sure you have a tool, not just for yourself, but that can be used as a team and has some legacy. So if you leave the organization, right, that never happens, that you have somebody that can pick it up. So that's why you need to be sure, not just on the tool you use, but how are you tagging things, right? What does that mean for you? You don't want to, everybody just tags things willy-nilly, and you can't really bring things down in aggregate and understand them at a level to say what's happening in this particular area. So have some consistency and groom at least once a quarter. And last, the forever scan. This is the thing, because it's like a beautiful mind or something, you just see these things, but remember, not everything is a signal. You can go crazy and start recording everything and highlighting everything, and then everything is nothing. So remember, look for things that are different, wild cards, impactful, recurring. Don't end up drawing conspiracy theories on walls. Usually your spouse doesn't like that. All right, there we go. This is just a resource I'm going to give you guys. I'm definitely not going to read it. This is version 2. I'm working on version 3 right now. It's sort of like all of this in a little nutshell, infographic. And another resource for you. This is what we use at the University of Houston. Is our foresight framework foresight. It's our methodology. It's a methodology. It's not the methodology, right? And what we just talked about today, the pointer's not where it is because that guy right there is scanning, and you can see there's a lot more. And really, from here to here, just covers those first 3 of the total 6 steps of strategic research. And the rest is in here, because this slide really is talking about the first 3. Some resources. So Dr. Andy Hines, who I studied under and worked and collaborated with at the University of Houston, has a fantastic book with his mentor, Peter Bishop, thinking about the future, guidelines for strategic foresight. It's, we've updated some things in our methodology since then in our research academically, but it's a great resource, a great read. It's pretty much step by step. There's some other good resources I put here that if someone asks, like, what is foresight? I usually send them these links. And if you want more training, right, obviously, if you want to get a master's, I'm sure all of you are like, oh, you get another degree, that's awesome. We do have that, but for those of you who just want to do a little on the lighter side, we do have a professional certification at the University of Houston. It is recognized by the Association of Professional Futurists, so you can be a member if that is your desire, but it's a great way. It's a week long when it's in person, and it's over 6 weeks once a week when it's virtual. They're pretty much the same program, and we do custom ones as well. And it walks through that basically this whole 6 steps, right? And some theory as well. TFSX is another organization that futures and they do learning and certification programs as well. I recommend them. There's a similar with a different bent. They call it natural foresight, and they have some different theories, but still really good stuff. A lot of corporations go through their program as well. And there's others, and I also do some training and consulting. I'm not trying to push myself here, but if you reach out to me, I can also give you other trainers and certificate programs if you're interested. But those are the 2 on top that I recommend the most. All right, last, this is how you can reach out to me. I do have a newsletter that I started this last spring called the Mudge Report. I include things like scan hits, things that are jobs in foresight, because even if you don't want a job, it's interesting to know what companies are hiring for, right? Sometimes it helps. And some other tidbits and just weird stuff I find interesting. And hopefully we have a few minutes for questions. Perfect, all right. Fire. Awesome, keep this in place.
Questions?
Make you run. Thank you, JT, but you teased me.
I know, right?
On one of your slides, you said the future of B2B marketing in, was it 2040?
I'll just make myself up, I'm not sure, but yeah, sure, 2040 in North America.
I was hoping you weren't making it up because I was actually hoping to hear your future work in the future of B2B marketing.
Right, yeah, I looked actually ahead of time, so there's another great resource, and I'll, if you reach out to me, I'll put it, I forgot to put it in the slide, called the Open Foresight Hub. And it's, I worked on it for a little bit, it's put out, sponsored by SAP, and it's really a collection of foresight work in different spaces. And I looked on there, I didn't really see anything about B2B marketing. That's not the holy grail of spaces, it's just a space. That's a project that probably should happen, right? And as you see, you know, of that project, we talked about the 6 steps. If we're doing a project that usually takes about 3 months, generally speaking, on average. So it's hard to like jump in. I know I'd love to have a crystal ball, make my job so much easier. But you know, we could talk about the different possibilities just speculatively about that, but there hasn't really been a lot of research in that space. Yeah.
How much would that cost?
That is the $1 million question. $1 million, no, it depends on who you go with, quite honestly. The rates are all over the place, like at the University of Houston, because we are part university sponsored, and we include students and alumni in our projects because it's a part of a learning experience for them. Generally charges, I would say, a well below market rate. Other individuals and groups, it just really depends. I would say, you know, you're probably, it depends how deep you want to go. It's a really hard question. You know, you're gonna spend probably at a minimum, probably around 50K for like sort of a base, and then you could go up to quite more than that, right?
Yeah, thanks, but even you can, so because I was trying to, like, to get started, to really, you know, put like a proof text inside your firm. Because again, the reflections I have on this is that for us, it's rough to get people who are thinking engineering and science. Where, you know,
Yeah.
all right, the laws of physics are there. We can use them to predict this, and we get this, and we're accurate to 9 decimal places. You're in we're looking at these really, the only weak signals that we appreciate are the ones we're trying to find extraterrestrial life. Is there any sort of sign out there?
SETI, right?
But so it's interesting. It seems that putting some proof text inside a corporate culture that's largely engineering or science driven. And getting started on one of these is really would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just keep this slide up for a sec. That's why there is a methodology and a science more or less behind it. And that is why we go after so much evidence, so much rigor, right? We can't see it definitively. But like a theoretical physicist is going to look at patterns and see like what things match up and what things don't, right? So there is a science behind it. And you know what we talked about today was just scanning, how we go across that. This is incremental, right? That's why it explodes like this, because you can't get the drivers without doing all this other work, right? So it's step by step. That's why it's so hard to answer a question about what do I see at the end of this when we haven't gone through all the steps. And it's a way of thinking. And so besides, you could hire a firm to do this for you. It's definitely not in your wheelhouse. So there's no way we're gonna be able to think like this, but we might be able to look at this when we get to the last steps and how it applies to our plans, because it makes sense how we think about strategy. Or you can start to train your mind and your organization and have organizational futures inside it as a discipline. And there's something called the foresight maturity model. And that helps you understand where you are as an organization with your ability to have foresight inside your group, right? And that's something that we do as well. We can do a foresight assessment. But if you're at the very, very beginning, you probably need to do that necessarily quite as much. But you'd be surprised, even companies that haven't even heard strategic foresight before, you do an assessment with them, and they're further along in some areas than they actually thought. And it's finding those areas of opportunity when you do that assessment. Like, we're struggling here. This is an area we need to improve on. Help us improve this area. So there is value to that. Yes.
Great presentation, JT. Thank you. Have you seen companies apply the find, collect, analyze model to their own databases? Well, what I mean by that is, you take a large B2B firm, they've got thousands and thousands of sales visits every year. So they're finding, if they're using Salesforce.com or some other CRM, they're collecting. But are they doing any of the analyzing?
They are. It's not, it very narrowly applies to the work we do in strategic foresight, because that's the stuff that's inside of their own company, and that would be really limited inside of their domain map, right? If we go back to here, you know, that's like this for them, right? And as foresight we bring it up, but if you do see that happening, it's the data-driven decision making is what we call it, right? And if you see organizations absolutely doing that, some much better than others, right?
Are they able to apply some of the principles you've got here for the broader?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say they apply our principles, I say they're shared principles.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, a lot of the stuff, when you talk to strategists, and like I do, like, in the last firm, I was the director of data strategy. Right, so we use a lot of the same tools. I snuck foresight in a lot of times, because I don't want to do a foresight project. You want to do a data strategy project? Yes, okay, well, we're gonna kind of do the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to build a little bit on my earlier question about misinformation. So now let's assume I've collected all this information about the tips, the signals. I've categorized it. I've got all this information in there, and I'm doing this routinely. Are there specific tools or frameworks or criteria that you could recommend for how to analyze that information to determine how valid is it? How much does it potentially impact me? What is the relevance? And you did share Steve with us, but wondering if there's any other kind of templates that we can think about.
Yeah, it's a bit of a craft question, and different people do it differently, right? Just like different analysts analyze differently. There's some obvious things. So the first thing is we can't analyze, we don't collect properly. So that enables everything else, right? And so when we're tagging things, again, if you're working on a particular project, you're gonna want to have specific tags that you know you're gonna use. You can start to do things like aggregation on that. You can say, how many things are we finding in that deal with ethics of whatever in Horizon 2, right? You start to say, okay. And you say, well, I don't really trust this source, but these other 3 sources are actually pretty spot on. And then you go back, that's why we record the links too. We go back, okay, let's take a closer look at that one. So it's really, you kind of start to group it together, find commonalities, and then you inspect things that maybe don't sound quite right. And part of that is just being experienced at it, right? That's why a lot of times if you're doing a project of the futures of, most companies bring in at least one futures consultant, if not a whole firm, because there's a lot of nuance and craft and experience in it. But if you're doing it inside of an organization just to provide those signals, then that's important. But remember, it's not always about accuracy, because we're not predicting. That's the other thing. It's okay if there's some really garbagey stuff in there, as long as it's a small percentage, because even if it's a made up thing, it's still potentially a possible future, right? It just maybe doesn't have as much credibility, and we're not trying to apply as much credibility to probability We're trying to help people think. So when we think of scenarios, we're not trying to say, here's a scenario, we got 4 of them, one of them's gonna happen. We don't know which one, so plan on it. That's not the intent of scenarios at all. The intent is to say, all this possible stuff could happen. Hopefully, across these very diverse scenarios, we have eliminated possible surprises, right? So the main thing is we look for aggregation in numbers to support it. And if it's really fringe, it's the only thing out there, we do a little more research on their sources, just like a journalist would. So it's very similar to if you have a history or background and also in journalism, it's very, very similar. There's not any really great perfect tools though. I wish there were, yeah.
One more, okay, so we'll take one more.
Mark's just a comment that we will be talking more about this in the market access roundtable, specifically some of the learning resources that he mentioned on the last slide. And what your company may be interested in doing with this.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's thank JT again.